How you doing, everybody? It's Wardy here, and we have a lot to break down in Mets land in our latest Big Mets Update segment, March 3rd, 2025, our first of two forms of content on the platform today, as the Mets have a game in a couple hours at the time of recording this against the Miami Marlins with Kodai Senga towing the rubber. We will have our immediate post-game reactions and analysis following the game, but if for whatever reason the game's a snooze fest, we will not go live for it. Instead, we'll come out with another video breaking down the key takeaways either later on tonight or tomorrow, so be on the lookout, folks, because now we have to get into the new MLB Pipeline Top 30 Mets prospect rankings just dropped earlier today. So we're going to deep dive the positives and negatives. If there are any negatives, our personal input as fans seeing these new rankings, because a lot has changed with how these prospects are perceived here in Mets land. From there, we will get into Jose Quintana, the former Mets veteran southpaw, because he is not coming back to Queens. Where did Quintana land? Was that the right move for the Mets to allow him to walk? And we will get into more on the rotation front, as well as the outfielders. Not only Mets prospect and Drew Gilbert do we have a key update on, but we also do on guys in Brandon Nimmo and, yes, Starling Marte. How does this impact things for guys like Alexander Canario and others? That and much more is what we're going to highlight right here, right now. So thank you guys so much for smashing that like and subscribe on as your first time. It's greatly appreciated. And shout out to our amazing sponsor at BetUS, which has you covered all your sports betting needs. But we'll get to them in a second, because first, let's do a quick breakdown of the Mets lineup tonight before this game starts at the time of recording this. To some of you guys watching already, we have as follows: Francisco Lindor batting in leadoff. Batting second is Juan Soto, the one and only. Batting third is going to be Polar Bear Pete Alonso. Batting fourth is Swaggy V himself and Mark Vientos. Batting fifth is what my girlfriend loves to call him, TT, that being and Tyrone Taylor. Batting sixth, we're going to have Louis Torrens at the catching position. Batting seventh is Donovan Walton, competing for that utility role with guys like Brett Beatty and Luis Angel Cunha getting the start there at second base. Chris Williams, who is a Mets AAA Syracuse catcher, gets a start at DH, and Jose Alzgar, who's been looking fantastic in the early goings of spring training. Another depth outfield option for the Mets, a speedy one at that, most formerly of the Padres. He's going to start there in left field with Kodai Senga towing the rubber with David Pearson, and then piggyback afterwards. Get the excitement going, folks. Even if, say, Senga doesn't pitch well, I'm just really happy to have him back out there, and we will break down further our reactions later on tonight, as I alluded to, everybody. But now let's get to our amazing sponsor that many of you guys know well here at BetUS, which has you covered with all your sports betting needs. All you guys got to do is simply head over to betus.com.pa today and use Wardy's promo code YouTube150. That way you too get a 150% bonus on your first deposit, $125 on your second and your third, up to $2,000 for whatever you guys want to bet on. And folks, my New York Knicks won an absolute magic game last night that we saw in overtime. They've won huge back-to-back games there, clutch games, one by 1 point. The other there that we saw in overtime last night. My Knicks aren't playing tonight, and that's okay. We're still doing a 3-leg NBA parlay. We're taking the Miami Heat that the Knicks beat 2 games ago, the Memphis Grizzlies, and OKC for the 3-leg parlay. And this is going to be 30 to pretty much win you 30, so you could have a total win of $38.71. Feel free to tail this bet, everybody, but please know I'm not a sports betting expert, just a diehard fan that loves to place daily bets here at BetUS, and I appreciate every single one of you guys. But now, folks, let's get into these prospect rankings, because I'm really excited about these. These dropped earlier today, and this will just be one of multiple prospect rankings that discussion that we have on the platform over the next couple weeks. I know my guy Joe DeMay of SNY will be dropping his updated rankings later on this week. We'll probably bring him on, if not at the end of this week, then sometime next week once I'm back from my spring training trip, as that will be beginning March 8th, everybody. Your guy will be in Port St. Lucie. I'll be in West Palm. I'll be in all those areas, Hope Sound as well, just in the general area there, heading some games up until the 11th, or at absolute latest 13th is when I'll be in Florida till. So I hope to see a lot of you guys there. But as we see the official pipeline rankings drop from Sam Dykstra is as follows: Brandon Spro, as a surprise to absolutely nobody, is the Mets' #1 ranked prospect. Coming in second here is going to be Jet Williams, Jet the Met. Carson Bench, number 3, and the Mets just drafted him a year ago. Love to see that. Ryan Clifford, what a piece he continues to be, guys. If you guys have been following anything here on the platform over the past year, then you know that we are heavy Ryan Clifford fans. Clifford has some of the strongest power out of any batter in the Mets minor leagues currently, and he tore the cover off the ball last year that we saw for the Binghamton Rumble Ponies, along with Drew Gilbert, who were both acquired there that we saw in the trade with Justin Verlander a year and a half, 2 years ago now. Noah McLean, who's really skyrocketing up the Mets board, so much so that he's not only a top pitching prospect for them that comes in currently second per MLB pipeline, but they have McLean expected to hit the bigs as soon as this season. So Nolan, who's no longer the Cowboy Ohtani that he was deemed when the Mets first drafted him. I'm trying to blank. I think they drafted him out of OSU, but don't quote me on that. Regardless, so once McClain was drafted, because I know him and Bange were teammates and went to the same place, McClain was initially both a hitter and a pitcher, but over the past year plus, the Mets have made it officially official that no more batting for McClain, and he really honed in greatly with his arsenal. Joe Nathan, who skyrocketed through the Mets minor leagues just like Brandon Sproat last year, comes in number 6 on the rankings, and he's expected to impact the Mets as soon as next season. Luis Angel Acuna, that we know, is coming in at number 7. I think that's a little low for him, but given his underwhelming play in the minor leagues and really extroverted performance that we saw in the major leagues, I can see the balance there. Acuna does move up higher from where he was, at least to begin last year. I'm not entirely sure. It fluctuated a lot for him last season. Jesus Baez, who is one of the hardest hitters, again, in the Mets minors, along with a guy like Ryan Clifford, is ranked 8th, which is really cool. And Elian Pena, who the Mets drafted this year with that huge slot bonus that we saw, Elian Pena comes in, and he is going to be there at number 9, the shortstop at just 17 years of age. Obviously, he's not going to be impacting the team anytime soon, but Elian Pena comes in there at number 9. At number 10, we have Ronnie Mauricio. Ronnie, who's back healthy after missing the past year plus, going down with injury in the Dominican Winter League a year plus ago. He's now cracking the Mets top 10, which leads to quite the contrast at how far one man can drop because of injuries, and that's Drew Gilbert. Drew Gilbert, who many of us believe is the Mets' top outfield prospect, is coming in 11th on the rankings here with the expectation that he could impact the Mets as soon as this year. Now, he absolutely plummeted in these rankings because of the fact that Drew really dealt with ailment throughout the course of last season. Just was the case with Jet Williams too, but they are much higher on Jet Williams being able to impact the Mets as soon as this season as well, knowing the infield group that they have there. I know they have an abundance of them, but the Mets are going to be keeping a close eye on Jet this year with his contact and OBP ability. For Drew, this is a massive development year that we know. Jeremy Rodriguez comes in here at number 12 on the rankings as well, a former IFA signing for the Mets of recent, which was a very solid one by them. Then we have at number 13, we have Jonathan Santucci here. I love Santucci. He has absolute beautiful mix of an arsenal there. The Mets drafted recently. The 22-year-old is going to come in 13th on the rankings. Boston Barrow is a name that a lot of Mets fans need to lock in on. He's part of the next wave of prospects that a lot of fans should be optimistic about and following along this year, that the Mets have a lot of optimism with. They're already expected to impact the Mets in the next couple years. Barrow only at 20 years of age there, and he has been an A+ to this point. Marco Vargas, who the Mets acquired in that trade for David Robertson back at the 2023 trade deadline with the Miami Marlins. He comes in there at 15th. He's dropped quite a bit since we landed him. Blade Tidwell has all the flame throwing, but he's got to command that strike zone. Has to work on those off-speed of breaking pitches a bit more. Love Blade. I think he has a lot of potential as potentially a reliever type for the Mets as soon as this season. He comes in 16th on the rankings. We have Trey Snyder there, shortstop, third base option for the Mets there, coming in at 17th. Nick Morabito, a true plate setter who I loved watching this past year in the minor leagues. He's going to continue. He is truly, like Drew Gilbert, a great example of what a ball player is supposed to be. Just a hard-nosed player that's always going out there trying to put the ball in play constantly. Nick Morabito did a great job last year leading the way. I'm pretty sure that Nick Morabito was the Mets offensive player of the year in the minor leagues this past season too. Nate Dome, now we have right-handed pitcher here at our 19th ranked at 22 years of age. Then we have Gutierrez there at catcher coming in at 20th. Jacob Reimer, third base outfield option there that we have at 21. Christopher Suero at 22. Eli Serrano, the third, here at 23, outfielder. Jonathan Pintaro, right-hand pitcher, we have at 24th. Edward Lantuag, I'm going to butcher the last name, so I'm just going to leave it at Edward. I apologize. They're at 25th, the outfield prospect. Dominic Hamill, who was the Mets pitching prospect of the year a couple years ago in the minor leagues, has fallen from grace since then, but he's still in the top 30. Ronald Hernandez, catcher, 27th. AJ Ewing, 28th there, outfield second base prospect. Jack Weninger, pitching prospect that the Mets are fairly high on this year, 29th. And Colin Houck, who's completely nosedived because former top draft pick by the Mets just a couple years ago that we know, I believe, under Epler, grew up a diehard Atlanta Braves fan, and it's fitting, and he has had a very underwhelming start to his professional career, but he's only 20 years of age, so he's got plenty of time to develop. Hopefully, it won't be a complete bust, and this is something we'll look back on in a couple years and say, wow, okay, the Mets have themselves something special here in Colin Houck. In the meantime, what we're going to focus on is just the stark contrast and how much the top 5, top 6 has changed, where Drew Gilbert is nowhere to be seen, and this is a testament to not only guys like Ellie and Pena being signed in the IFA pool this past year, but also the great development that the Mets had on the pitching end. They really are hoping to make great strides on the offensive end this year internally, but pitching-wise, the Mets had a lot of steps forward between Brandon Sproat, Noah McLean, Jonathan in particular this past year. So Mets fans, my big question each and every one of you is, do you agree or disagree with these rankings? Which one do you think makes the most sense, and which one do you think makes the least sense? I think there's absolutely still an argument to have Drew Gilbert in this Mets top 10, and I would honestly make the argument for a guy like Drew Gilbert to have him in over a guy like Ronnie Mauricio, because I don't classify Ronnie too much as a prospect right now personally, even though I understand he still is one. Same thing with Acuna. Once they already start to get some sample sizes, it's hard for me to view them as such. I understand once they hit a certain amount of games, they're no longer eligible as a prospect. Regardless, though, I think Drew is still deserving of being in this top 10, but I think there's fair arguments that, every other guy's just as deserving or close to, especially Jesus Baez, I think is deserving of being in that top 10 now for the Mets. He has a lot of power. I think we're going to see that exemplified furthermore this year. And in case you guys want to see a further breakdown on how these rankings were looking and how they went about from the hit tools to all the other aspects, let's see what Mr. Dykstra had to break down. On the hit tools out of 60, that's Ellie and Pena, so he is the top hitter when we look at the tools in the farm. Power, 60 grade, that's Ronnie Mauricio, but with Jesus Baez and Ryan Clifford right behind him. Run, that's Nick Morabito. Again, he's a speed demon. He's a true plate setter, just as the case with Luis Angel Acuna. Arm at the 60 rank, we have Carson Bange, which is awesome. Jesus Baez, Ryan Clifford, Drew Gilbert, Colin Houck, and Ronnie Mauricio fall in that category. The only one that's surprising me in that category is Colin Houck, so he clearly does have a cannon for an arm, and that's good to see. Defense, Luis Angel Acuna reigns supreme there at the 60 grade. Fastball at 65 is Jonathan with the best grade among all Mets pitching options. Curveball is Jonathan as well. We saw how much that nasty curveball was gorgeous last year in the minor leagues, especially in Brooklyn. We see the slide piece at a 70 grade. That's all Noah McLean, a really, really good pitch that he has there. Brandon Sproat has the plus changeup at 60 grade. The cutter at 55 is Jonathan Pintero, with Noah McLean right behind him. And then control at 55 is Nate Dome, who cracked in the Mets top 20 or so. So very strong rankings there. Appreciate MLB Pipeline coming out with them, and be on the lookout as we will have more prospect discussions for the Mets next week. And then obviously every single week throughout the regular season when we do post-game coverage and big Mets updates, we will not only lump in all the key takeaways for the team at the Mets level, but also the minor league levels. What's happening each and every day there in the minor league games. Those will be important things that we break down together. Now, folks, before we get on with our next topics, one thing that I did want to leave you with was the Mets promotions that they just dropped earlier today. I think you guys would appreciate hearing a little bit about this. Most importantly, in my opinion, or at least to some, $5 Tuesdays are back in Flushing, Queens. This means that you can get select items, including Coors Light. You can get yourself a water, a soda, your normal Nathan's hot dog, a pretzel, Smart Water, all that stuff for $5 a piece, which honestly is quite the bargain given how much everything costs at the ballpark, not just at Citifield, but everywhere now, it certainly feels that way. $5 Tuesdays are back every single Tuesday. You will get those discounts throughout the course of the season. Family Sundays, which I absolutely love as a dad now, especially as we go on to the further years, because I don't see this going away anytime soon. Family Sunday package is awesome. You can get 4 tickets for $50 or so. I really like that, excluding the July 6th game. So all other Sunday, you have a Family Sunday option that you can take your little ones with to the ballpark all season long. Fireworks nights, which are awesome. Block parties, which I'm fully planning to take part in for at least one this year, if not multiple. We're also going to be trying to do some events at Citifield this year. And Mr. and Miss Met post-game dash, which is very cool too. Kids 12 and under can run the bases at Citifield after select Sunday afternoon games. So just little ways to kind of give back to the Mets fans and the community here, which we certainly appreciate. So that's the latest that's going on with their promos, everybody. Hopping back in here because I finished the recording and realized I forgot to talk about Jose Quintana, didn't I? So I'm probably putting this either in the middle of the video or somewhere in the video. Regardless, let's talk about the Jose Quintana news now, everybody, because he has signed a 1-year contract. Well, yeah, you guessed it, the Milwaukee Brewers. Now, I'm not trying to say that I called this, everybody, but I did kind of call it. If you guys have been following the content or the past week on the channel, we still don't know the details of the contract, the dollar-wise, but I'd imagine it's probably an absolute north of $10 million range, and maybe a little bit less, obviously, for someone like Quintana, but not with the 110% tax now because he's not signing with the Mets. But I called it because over the past week, I was saying if Quintana is not coming to the Mets, expect him to land back in the NL Central. He's been a Pittsburgh Pirate. He's been a St. Louis Cardinal. He's been a longtime Chicago Cub. You might as well slot him in and be a Cincinnati Red next year now that he is currently finding himself with the Milwaukee Brewers. And it's fitting that a day after it's announced that Billy Epler is now the special advisor for the Milwaukee Brewers in the front office, that they sign Jose Quintana, just like what Billy Epler did for the Mets a couple years ago. So Jose lands back in the NL Central, where he already has a lot of familiarity, also dominates in that ballpark. We saw him carve up those batters as well against the Brewers. It isn't outlandish. It's not something that he hasn't done before, and he can do that again. But the reason as to why the Mets didn't do this was because of why they brought in Jose Urena. They don't want to give any guaranteed major league contracts to guys with the 110% tax when they initially didn't even have true reasoning to want to bring in Quintana, even though I think it made endless sense to bring in a guy like Jose, who gave you a very strong year last year in 170 innings. And I don't think the risk outweighed the reward, even in a scenario where, say, Quintana looks solid and then he is somewhat boxed out once everyone's healthy. I think the argument is, in a six-man rotation, Jose Quintana still potentially gives you more upside than Griffin Canning. And if he doesn't, then I don't think he would be stubborn in not wanting to go in a bullpen role, but I can see why he still feels himself as a true starter and wants to help a team the best way that he can in a starter role. So that's how he feels. We'll see how he does with the Brewers. Brewers get the best out of pitchers. They have a great lab there as well. But I will say I'm bothered by the fact that the Mets didn't do initially more, but I always find myself like that every spring training when injuries happen. If you guys have followed the channel, this is a broken record of exactly that. Nothing has wavered, has been the continued thought process that when key starters go down, that is exactly why I put myself in a position to say, hey, let's go add some people. Obviously not trying to land the best of the best, even though I'm not opposed to Dylan Cease. Desperate times call for desperate measures, but the Mets don't feel like they're desperate, nor want to act in a desperate manner in the early goings of spring training, when we don't know when Sean and I will return, but hopefully it'll be sometime in April. In the case of Frankie Montas, sometime in June should not still kill the Mets versus a depth that they've already acquired. Now, I know fans don't love to hear this. I know that there's a reality where we could see Jose Quintana have a very strong year with the Brewers this year as a back-end starter, when he could be doing that with the Mets all year long. We'll have to see it to believe it, but until then, he is now a Milwaukee Brewer, so no longer an option for the Mets. Jose Urena is exactly why the Mets went down that route that they did, to bring in a swingman that can be a starter and reliever for them and not have any too much major league commitment as he is signed on a minor league deal versus the guaranteed dollars that someone like Quintana is getting. So Mets fans, please let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you are bothered by Jose Quintana landing with the Milwaukee Brewers, or if this is a move that you think made a lot of sense not only for him, but for the Mets to go their separate ways. If you thought that the 110% tax was just too much, along with the obvious age factor that comes with Quintana not getting any younger, let me hear in the comments down below. As we get back in here, let's now talk a bit more about what is happening in Mets land, because Drew Gilbert, as you guys saw that we talked about earlier today, has dropped in the Mets prospect rankings, and furthermore is not going to be playing in games for the Mets anytime soon. I know this bums some Mets fans out to hear, but it's a reality. As reported from Anthony DeCumber earlier today, Drew Gilbert may not play at all in Grapefruit League games because the Mets intend to take him slow coming back off of the 2024 season, mostly lost due to a hamstring injury. But the Mets do expect Gilbert to be ready for minor league opening day. So the Mets do expect him to be ready. That's an encouraging thing to begin the year in the minor leagues. But furthermore, I think this only benefits a guy like Alexander Canario when we talk about him a lot as to why did the Mets bring him in, right? Well, further proof, right? So to bring in a guy like Canario, if you're having at all any health uncertainty with a guy like Drew Gilbert, who we think when he is fully healthy in Syracuse this year, it won't take him too long to get the call up to the bigs because of how much immediate impact we think he's going to have, not only with his power, but just his scrappiness. He has the kind of moxie, that you would want on this roster right now, even in a deep playoff run. I mean, he really feels like the type of guy that could play himself into a role, even if that's not until much later in the second half of the year, because of maybe one of Tyrone Taylor or Jose Siri was underwhelming, that they just weren't working out, or maybe you just want to give a guy an opportunity to get a different look because maybe the Mets aren't happy in a certain outfield area. You can't predict obviously what's going to happen, but we know that you can at least try to have as much certainty as possible. Drew Gilbert is far from certain when it comes to how he's going to begin his year, but the Mets are at least hopeful and expecting him to begin the year in AAA without a problem. So for any fans that have been wondering, Wardy, why has Drew Gilbert not been in games yet this spring training? This is why, and this looks like it's going to continue to be the case regardless of how we feel about it. So Drew Gilbert, continue to heal up my guy. He's had some really fun at-bats. We saw him take Edwin Diaz deep a couple times and then swing and miss a couple times over the past week in camp. So he's been really having fun and looking good, as has been the case with Brandon Nimmo as well. Brandon Nimmo just got back in game action for the Mets, and I do have some unfortunate news on Nimmo, even though you're seeing him hustling right there. Low-level concern per Carlos Mendoza that he said himself today, but Brandon Nimmo is dealing with a little bit of a nagging soreness going on with his right knee. So low level of concern, not something that the Mets are concerned about much, but he is not in tonight's lineup because of that reason. And Nimmo's kind of, sporadically in the lineup over the next week plus. That'll go in hand as to why. That along with still coming back from plantar fasciitis that he feels that he's healed from, but still taking it slow. Not fully sprinting yet. I believe he's still at 92% or so, but by the end of spring training, he'll get to 100%. He's set in confidence, that being in Brandon. And there's him doing some outfield work earlier today. As we saw, Brandon Sproat also taking some awesome bullpen that we saw today. Anytime that Brandon Sproat's towing the rubber, I think we just need to sit back, relax, grab your favorite treat, grab some popcorn, do something, and just get ready for the ride. That's hopefully Brandon Sproat taking the league by storm here as soon as possible in the 2025 regular season. We broke down Sproat plenty on the platform, folks, so if you haven't checked it out already, highly implore you to do exactly that. Now, staying on the outfield discussion, let's get to Starling Marte for a second, because as you guys can see right there, Starling Marte took some BP today there that we saw pregame against the Marlins. Marte also was doing some outfield work, which I will say he didn't look overly athletic, especially when you look at the waist down, but I understand that these are just little plays they're doing right now, and he's taking it slow as he's been dealing with knee soreness for like 8 months now. Carlos Mendoza did say that we can expect Marte to get into either minor league or spring training games in the next few days, and this is notable, everybody, because there's been an increased belief that Marte is not exactly ramped up to the liking that the Mets want for the beginning of the regular season, that it isn't out of the realm of possibility that Marte will start the year on the injured list if he is not, say, traded. Tim Healy, who came out with a great piece breaking down a bit more on Alexander Canario, very much what we've reaffirmed on the platform since the Mets landed Canario. We all thought right away it makes a lot of sense with someone like Marte with his uncertainty not only on his health but also on his trade status, so bear that in mind. But also with guys like Nimmo and others, Canario's just an uber athletic guy that can play all outfield positions, has power, and has taken quality at bats so far this spring training when we've seen him. So Canario, in my opinion, the only way he doesn't make this team is if the Mets just feel like they aren't able to give him enough reps, even after trading for him and spending the $100K to acquire him there from the Chicago Cubs, and that trade after he was DFA'd by them. But in the case of Marte, we have to lock in on him this spring training because, again, if Marte provides little defensive ability, I understand the Mets want him more in that platoon DH role. But the Mets want him in that platoon DH role not just because they landed Juan Soto, but because they don't trust Marte in the outfield. That's the greater problem here. The Mets have a lot more confidence in guys like, I would probably argue even Jesse Winker, which is saying a lot given how low of a bar that is, because Jesse's defense is nothing to be flexing about. And I love Jesse just as much as the next guy, but Jesse is at best an average defender. But the point is you can at least put him there, whereas Marte, there's serious concerns as to what you're getting defensively from him. All the more reason as to why he's not only in a very platoon role right now in a limited split DH role, but also as to why the Mets wouldn't mind parting with him and having a guy that can actually give them comfortable defense on all outfield positions the way that Alexander Canario would certainly do. That right there is why Canario is appealing, and then you actually see the bat-to-ball skills. The Mets have a level of confidence that they can get some untapped potential out of him from what the little sample sizes that we've seen so far at the major league level, because they have been good. Canario has impressed in sample sizes at this point, so it's not out of the realm of possibility or anything like that. But Mets fans, I definitely want to know how you're feeling, everybody, as we've broken down all the latest in Mets land. And as I said, be on the lookout because we will have more Mets-related coverage later on today, either in a media post-game live show format because the Mets had a great game, Kodai saying looked good, and maybe some key offensive takeaways. If the game is a dud, if there really isn't anything notable outside of maybe one swing like what Jose Siri did yesterday, then we will probably lump it into an update segment just like we're doing here now, as you guys seem to really enjoy that a lot more versus me trying to stretch out a post-game each night for games that clearly aren't worthy of going out of our way to break them down to a T. When it comes to regular season, that's a different animal. I know you guys want that more often than not, but spring training is spring training for a reason, so that is what I'll leave you with. Thank you guys again for watching, and to all my amazing subscribers that have helped us reach 32,000 subs, do not forget, folks, either Wednesday or Thursday of this week, barring changes, we will be doing a live show giving away, yes, a Mets jersey to one lucky subscriber. I'll let you guys know at least a day in advance chance, hopefully, or at least the morning of one. We will be doing it so that way you guys can chime in. Just join the live show for that day, chime in the chat, and I'll randomly select on a comment. Whoever I select on, you will be the automatic winner. We gave away a Juan Soto jersey when we hit 30,000. We gave away a Juan Soto Mets shirt jersey when we hit 31,000. Whether it's another Juan Soto jersey or a different player on the roster, I'm looking forward to gifting one of you guys as a further thank you for the endless support that you've shared here on the platform every single day for the past 4+ years. Love you guys to death, and as always, no matter what, let's go Mets. Peace out.